Hello, and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. You know, in the last 2 or 3 segments, I've been talking to you about various melody flutes. I brought in sasutos and penny whistles and song flutes and various flutes, the regular recorders, and we've been talking about them. I've talked about how they're designed, how they're simple instruments, but they play a lot of music, and we've gone over some of the construction of the recorders. I brought in diagrams and so forth. So I thought today what I would do is just deal with the recorders themselves. What instruments are true recorders? What are used in orchestras and bands all over the world? Because there are so many of the melody flutes that are similar to each other that I just wanted to spend one segment dealing with just the recorders and the different type of recorders, what they're called, what they can do. So this show is going to be specifically with the recorders. I'm not planning to play any specific music except to demonstrate them, and I want to talk to you about the 6 major kinds of recorders that exist. They do play all kinds of music. There are a lot of orchestras that are just recorder orchestras. They're wonderful. They play all kinds of wonderful music. In Europe, you can get into recorder orchestras where there may be 40 or 50 people in an orchestra, and they're all playing recorders, nothing else but recorders. And they do have the capability of playing very, very complicated music. I arrange classical music for recorders. I've used recorders when I've played songs from the Messiah, from Handel's Messiah. And so I just thought it would be good to take one segment and just deal with the recorders themselves. No sasutos, no penny whistles, no song flutes, no tonettes, and all of the other similar kinds of instruments that I call melody flutes that I bring in. So I'm going to be using some charts here, and we're going to talk about each of the 6 kinds of recorders that exist. There are 6 kinds of recorders. You have the soprano, you have the sopranino, you have altos, you have tenors, you have folded basses, and then you have the great basses. I do not have a great bass or big basses, they're called. There are different names for it. They cost thousands of dollars. They're very interesting instruments. But I do have a small bass because I have the folded bass. So I have brought in examples of all the different kinds of recorders, and this is what we're going to discuss today. So let's take a look at the soprano recorder. It is sometimes called the descant. I've got some here. This is one I often use. Most people who play recorders play the descant. They're about 12 inches long. They're about, say, 12 inches and a half. They're in the key of C. They are the chief melody instruments of the recorder family. And so I will show you a couple of these. This is one. This is a Yamaha that I use frequently. I have a German recorder. This actually comes from Germany, made out of wood. You have very expensive recorders that are made out of wood. This is a German one. And so it's called a Sonata, and it comes from Germany. I brought 2 LMIs with me. One of them is a Baroque instrument, and the other one is a German instrument. And talking about the fingerings, you have Baroque fingerings and you have German fingerings. They look exactly alike. They sound exactly alike. But the fingering pattern is a little bit different because one is Baroque and one is not. So let me go over some of these information that I have about these instruments, sometimes called descants. So the C melody recorder, it's in the key of C, 12 and a half inches long. It has a good tone. It's easy spacing between the tone holes, and this is what you have to watch for, especially if you're teaching a child how to play the tone. It can't be too large because the hands have to be big enough to cover all of the tone holes. We'll get into that. It's in pitch with itself, in pitch with others. It pitches well with A440. It is what is learned musically with the recorders, like for example, scales, fingerings, music reading, and so forth, can be transferred easily to other instruments. So if you're learning the recorder, the fingering patterns, the way that you play it, the breathing techniques, everything that you learn is usually transferred to other instruments. It makes a good instrument as a starter instrument because you can easily jump off from the recorder, the C melody recorder or the descant, to other instruments. It's not hard to do at all. The fingering is like the saxophone fingering and the flute fingering. I've showed you that before, but I'll show it to you again. It fits in well with other instruments, bands, orchestras, trios, quartets, and so forth. It is the leading melody instrument used for solos. So let me show you a little bit about the recorder. This is a C melody recorder in the key of C. When I say it pitches perfectly, if you have a good instrument, it will pitch perfectly. It won't be sharp, it won't be flat. I can pick this instrument up and I could tune an orchestra to it. It's that accurate. The tone holes are easily spaced, so that it's very easy to get your fingers on it. The key to playing the recorder is that it doesn't have keys as such like other instruments do, but you have to have your fingers exactly over the holes or you can't get a tone out of it. If you half hole it, you're going to get a sharp or a flat. If you use too much air, you're going to squeal. Let me just play a few notes. You usually hear me playing this or one like it frequently. It has a good tone. It plays in 2 octaves, the lower octave and the higher octave. Most of the fingerings are the same for both. In terms of transferring what you learn to other instruments, the saxophone, the lower level of the saxophone, it fingers exactly. The notes for the C scale finger exactly the same on the saxophone as they do on the recorder. This would be your C. This would be your B, A, G, F, E, D, and C. Now the saxophone, of course, is a lot more complicated. You have keys and you have, if you get into the higher register, you have some different fingerings, but the basic fingerings are the same. So this is an interesting instrument, used a lot, used in quartets, used in trios, and in the back you have your tone hole for the thumb. You use that tone hole to be able to get octaves. You can get higher octaves just by taking your thumb and pulling it down a little so it's not completely covered. And what you get over that from that is you're going to get an octave up. Now, not all of the octaves are based on the tone hole, but many, many of the octaves are. And you have, and this is why I brought these 2 little ones here. These are LMIs. LMIs are a student model made by the LMI company, look alike, sound alike, play alike, but they finger a little differently. You cannot tell the difference when you look at an instrument, whether it has a Baroque fingering pattern or whether it doesn't. You can't tell because it's not obvious. The only way you know that it's a Baroque fingering pattern, and for this I'm going to show you on the alto. If you can look, I don't know, I've shown this before. I use the lighter colored one because it's easier to see. But there's a little tiny B that's right above the tone hole, right above my finger. I don't know if you can catch that or not, but a very little tiny B. If you see a little tiny B on the back of the instrument, there it is. You can see it right there. You got it. That means it's a Baroque instrument, that you play it in a Baroque fashion. And the only difference between a Baroque and a German instrument is the fact that the fingerings are a little bit different on some notes, not all notes. So if I'm going to play an F on the alto, I'm just using the alto because it'll be easier to see. But normally on a soprano, you use this finger, you add this finger. Now, with the alto, it's a little harder to do it because the finger stretches between the tone holes are a little bit larger. But on the soprano instrument, this also has a little B, but it's so tiny I don't think you'd see it. So for an F, I just put this down. It's not, if it's B, A, G, F, I put this finger down for a better pitch. Most people actually do play Baroque instruments rather than German because the fingering pattern is just, it's a little bit more accurate in terms of its pitch. But that's about the only difference. If you play one, you can play the other. So this is the descant, or the C melody recorder in the key of C. The next one I want to show, well, let me get back to the LMIs. Here we have, this is a little, I don't think you can pick up the B, but there is a little tiny B in the back, but it's so dark I don't think you can pick it up. And if I play it, Baroque fingering for that F. You could tell this is just a little bit sharper if I don't put down that finger. So this is the Baroque. This here looks exactly like it, produced by the same company. It has no marking on the back of it at all. It's just blank. It's just vacant. You have your tone hole, but no demarcation that this is a Baroque instrument. So I'm assuming it's going to be a German finger, which is a little easier. G, F, E, D. These are little student models, and the only thing I can say about them, they play well. There's nothing wrong with the way they play. However, you have to really kind of push air, because if you don't, they seem to be a little bit flatter than some of the other instruments that I have. It's not a real complaint at all. It's just a statement that you need to push the air to it a little bit to keep it in pitch. So let's go from the sopranos to, I think I got the sopranino next in my notes here. The sopranino. It's an interesting little instrument, fully a recorder, plays perfectly fine, very high pitched. It is actually, if I go over my notes, it is 9 inches long. And that's really small. It's the smallest of the recorders that I play. It's very high pitched. The tone holes are close together. That might make it a little bit harder to play, because since the tone holes are small and since they're closer together, you can easily get your fingers kind of wrapped up with each other. You see how high it gets. Now, I used to play in recorder orchestras, and various recorders were used, but I rarely saw anybody with a sopranino. And I think the reason for it is that it's so high-pitched that it's hard to blend with anything, you know. But it does play. It is a legitimate recorder. You can play. I have played solos on it. It is a little harder to play, not because it's harder to breathe into it. It's not hard to breathe into it at all. The problem's going to be is that your fingers are so close together, and if you have large hands, that could pose a problem for you. And the other thing is that they're so easy to squeal them, because it doesn't take a whole lot of air to play them. And because they are so high-pitched, it's really kind of difficult to pitch and blend in with other instruments, because it can override almost anything. It has the same tone hole in the back, the thumb hole, And this one's a Yamaha. Most of my instruments are Yamaha. Yamahas are wonderful. I've never had a Yamaha do anything wrong. I've never had one disappoint me in any way. They're always perfectly pitched. They always play well. And so I have a lot of instruments that are Yamahas. However, there are a lot of good brand names out there. Yamaha isn't the only one. But this is a sopranino. And the other thing to note about the sopranino, it's one unit. It doesn't pull apart. You know, most of the instruments will pull apart into three pieces. You'll have the foot joint, you'll have the body of the instrument, you'll have the head joint, which is also the windway. But on a little sopranino, it's one unit, and it doesn't necessarily come apart. The body of the instrument, the foot joint are all the same. And it's just like one unit together. It does make it a little harder to clean. I'm going to take in maybe a couple of segments and show you how to take care of an instrument, how to clean it properly, where to leave it, where to put it, how to handle it, how to keep it so it's not too hot, it's not too cold. That makes a big difference with instruments. Now I'm going to go on into the alto. The alto is sometimes called the treble, and a lot of people like the altos. It's their favorite instrument. So let me show you this one. It is larger. It has a deeper tone. It does sound nice because of the deeper tone. It has a little wider finger stretches, so you can't do a lot of the scale work that you would do with a regular instrument. But let me go over my notes here, and then I'll take and compare, because I've got two of them here. I actually have three of the trebles. I have three altos. So the alto, it's at 18.5 inches long. It's got a beautiful tone. And when I've played in orchestras with it, a lot of people have said this is their absolute favorite instrument. They have a medium spacing of the tone holes, very accurate pitch. They blend very, very well with other instruments. They just go right with the flow. They're beautiful to listen to. And there are a lot of past composers. A lot of people don't realize that, but composers such as Purcell, Bach, Handel, they wrote for the alto recorders. A lot of their sonatas were written so that alto recorders could have the lead part because of the beauty of their tone. They're in the key of F. The sopranino, I want to mention, also is in the key of F. And they are hard to do scale work due to the fact of the tone holes. So let me get my two out here. I actually have three of them. This one I'll show you first because it's easier to see. You can see the tone holes. You can see that you have to stretch your fingers. Now, I used to teach at a school. For a year I taught in a Christian school, and they wanted me to do recorders, and that's basically what I did. And all of the students wanted to play the larger ones, the tenors, the altos, the bass. And they wanted to do that. It was more fascinating. It was more fun. But a lot of them would not be able to make the finger stretches even in the alto because they're harder. They're stretched. The longer the tube, the lower the pitch. But also, since you don't have keys on these instruments, you have to stretch your fingers to go over the tone holes. The tenor has some keys, the bass has keys, and we'll be getting into that next. So it's harder to do, but they are lovely. It is a beautiful toned instrument. Now, this one here is a Baroque. That means I have to use a Baroque fingering on it, and that's not hard to do. The only thing is, if you are older, you have arthritis in your hands, you have a hand injury, your joints aren't as supple as they used to be, you may have difficulty with it on that basis. It's certainly easy enough to play. It's made like the other recorders, and it has a nice rich tone, but if you're going to do a lot of scale work, if you're going to do a lot of fast work, then it's going to be harder to do, because the thing about the recorders and other instruments like them and other melody flutes like them, you must have your finger right directly over and completely closing the tone hole. If you don't, you're not going to get the note. It's either going to be fuzzy, or it's going to squeal, or it's going to be off pitch and going to be the wrong note. And so it's harder to do it on an instrument like this. This has the tone hole in the back. You get octaves the same way. The beauty of the recorders and other instruments like it is that you don't have to worry about reeds, springs, cork, you know, all of the things that you have, the rods, everything like that. It's just you pick it up and you play it. So this is one of them. And this is the other one. It is also made by Yamaha. It's also a Baroque. There's a little brown bee in the back of it. And you have the same problems with the tone holes. It's just absolutely a beautiful toned instrument. Now, I do have the tenors and the basses that I want to go into, but we're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to continue with this next time, and we will finish it next time. I only want to talk to you about the tenors and the basses. They're wonderful instruments, but I want to demonstrate them, and they are larger and they are more beautiful. So we'll close it here, and we'll continue with this next time. Please join me then.